In this video, we'll do corrections for homework 9. Homework 9 asked for 3 different conditional statements to animate 3 different shapes. The first one was a shape that moved from the top of the screen to the screen's bottom and then stopped moving. So I'm going to make my shape. I'll start it in the middle of the screen, and I want it to animate it moving vertically from the top to the bottom, so I'm going to need to make a variable. I'm going to make an integer variable, and because it's moving, the shape will move vertically, I'm going to call it y, because it's moving along the y-axis, and I'll start it at, let's say, 50 pixels down. So y parameter for shape. I'm going to use that y variable as the y parameter, and then I'll make it 100 by 100. And let's give it a fill as well. To make the shape move down, I'm going to say y equals y plus 1. And then to have the shape stop when it reaches the bottom of the screen, I only want it to be moving downwards until the y value gets to a place where it's at the bottom. And then after that point, I don't want this statement to be used anymore. I don't want the equation to be called. So I'm going to say if y is less than 450, then move downwards, then call this expression. Once y gets to be greater than 450, this whole expression will be called, and y will remain at 451. So as soon as it gets y has a value of 450 and it adds 1 on and becomes 451, this condition will be met, and this condition will no longer be met, and this whole conditional statement will be skipped over. There are other ways to do this too that we explored a little bit in class, but this is probably the most straightforward. If you have a different solution, such as subtracting once, having 2 algebraic expressions or equations and have a y subtract at a certain point, or setting it equal to a certain point, those would probably work too. Okay, in the next part of the assignment, we were making a shape change color when the mouse is in the right half of the screen. If you use 2 conditional statements to do this, that's completely fine. I'm going to just use 1, but if you have 2 conditional statements, it's completely fine as well. So for this one, I do not need an integer variable. I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to just I'll put the circle right in the middle of the screen. So right now I have a red circle in the middle of the screen, and the red is the only fill, and it comes right before ellipse, so that applies. If I wanted to do this just with 1 conditional statement, I could say, I could put it between the original fill and my shape and say if mouse x gets to be greater than 250, so if the mouse is in the right half of the screen past 250 on the x-axis, then put a different fill in here. That's blue. So this fill will apply if the conditional statement isn't met, because if the condition isn't met, if mouse x is not greater than 250, it'll skip right over this whole thing, so the original fill, red, will apply to the ellipse. But when this statement is true, when the mouse is on the right half of the screen, if it's past 250 on the x-axis, then the blue fill will be the one that comes right before the ellipse, and therefore will be the one that applies. And the final conditional statement that was needed was a shape that disappears after it's been on the screen for 3 seconds. So for this one, I do need an integer variable. I need a counter variable to count how many times draw has looped through. The assignment actually said 180 times through draw, which is approximately 3 seconds, as draw loops through at a rate of about 60 times a second. So I'm going to say int I, that's my counter. I'll start my counter at 0 at always. That's my counter variable. I'll go have my red ellipse again, and I only want it to be on the screen for the first 180 times that draw is called. So I need my counter to always be counting up. I equals I plus 1. Oops. Third time's the charm. I is always counting up. And so I only want the ellipse to be called when I is less than 180. So if I is less than 180, then draw the ellipse. So it'll be on screen and then disappear once, and I will continue to count up forever, but all the subsequent values will always be greater than 180. So this will always, this will never be true again, and so it's just forevermore calling the background, covering up the ellipses that were called